He lived in my constituency. We got together and we talked about it, and we held various protests. He was given the part. He's got a fantastic career, and he's made a fantastic contribution to the artistic scene in this country. Thank you, Nabil. Danny was elected your MP in 2017, and she overturned this huge majority. She did it because of her personality, she did it because of her humility and her honesty, and she did it because of the incredible hard work by people in the Labour Party in Midlothian to get her elected. So Danny, thank you, and thank you all of you for ensuring she got elected. But Danny understands the community she represents, understands the history of the community she represents, and the way this was a huge pit, and indeed there was the huge Scottish coalfields that were so disfigured by the activities of Margaret Thatcher's governments in the 1980s, which destroyed the mining industry in Britain. Danny understands that we also have to look to the future and bring investment and hope to all of those communities. And so when I called her up and said, Danny, I'd like somebody to become a spokesperson for our investment for the future in a green industrial revolution, which will harness the skills of all the industries to bring about a more sustainable future. She said yes, she would love to do it, and she's done it absolutely brilliantly, because Danny is somebody that understands our history, understands our present, but also understands that we cannot go on with free market economics dominating our thinking, leaving former mining communities, former steel communities, way behind with unemployment, deprivation, mental health stress, and fly-by-night jobs by fly-by-night companies. I'll give you an example. The former collieries in Nottinghamshire that were great places like Shirebrook end up being replaced by Mike Ashley and Sport Direct, with most of the staff working on zero-hours contracts, with no union rights, no recognition, and terrible working conditions. That is not the future that the mining community fought for. That is not the future that the steel community or any other community fought for. So it is about how we address these issues. This election is about many, many things. Many of the media will decide the election is about this, this and this, and they keep telling me, why aren't you talking about this, this and this? And I said, because there are 65 million people in Britain who will be able to take part in and vote in the election. They are the ones who decide what the issues are. And I tell you, what you pick up talking to people on doorsteps and community centres, buses and trains and cafes and so on, is not always what the media think they ought to be talking about. I know it's very naughty of the public to not talk about what the media really think they should be talking about, but I simply say this: in a constituency like this that has almost 5,000 people in receipt of personal independence payments, almost 40% of those in receipt of personal independence payments get it for what's called psychiatric disorders. In reality, it's mental health stress. When you have so many people suffering from mental health stress, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? Is that just one of those things, or is it because of insecurity in their lives? Insecurity in housing, insecurity in the private rented sector, poverty at home. Why are so many children living in poverty in this area? Why are 21% of the population of this constituency in fuel poverty? Are any of these things necessary? Are 8,000 children living in poverty? Any of these things necessary? No. Our election campaign, as it was in 2017, as indeed were the two election campaigns I fought for the Labour Party leadership, were about ending austerity in Britain. Think back to 2010. Think back to the decisions made by the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats who got into coalition together. They made a political choice of imposing austerity on the whole of the United Kingdom. They made a political choice to freeze public sector wages. They made a political choice to freeze benefit payments. They made a political choice to treble university fees in England. They made a political choice not to invest in the future. 9 years later, you see the results of it. Most working class communities have lost about 25% of their spending power since 2010. Most of those communities now suffer higher levels of stress and poverty, as I indicated. Many young people feel a sense of hopelessness and desperation about the future. They're simply being told you've got to wait for the market to catch up and do something for your community. And so this election to me is about a change of direction in our economic circumstances. We inherit a country that is more economically divided than it's been for a very long time, and the wealth gap is getting wider and wider. We have a government that's obsessed with tax write-offs, tax relief and tax arrangements for the very wealthiest. Not surprising, since they're funded by the very wealthiest, they're funded by the very people that benefit from all of that. Or you have our alternative, a Labour Party supported generously by our trade union affiliates and by ordinary people all over the country. The average individual donation to the Labour Party election funds is £27. I don't know any billionaires, so I couldn't ask them to give us any donations to our election funds, and we don't want their money. We're happy to get the support of unions and ordinary people all over the country because they have a vision of a different world, of a different country, of a fundamentally better place in the great traditions of our Labour movement. So, we will end austerity by investing for the future. We'll end austerity through a national investment bank, through transformation funds, and £70 billion of investment will come to Scotland as a result of the election of a Labour government. That £70 billion will provide the resources necessary for the housing that's obviously needed when there's over 140,000 people in housing need all across Scotland, when so many children are living in poverty. Provide that investment for the infrastructure, transport infrastructure, bus infrastructure, housing and health infrastructure. But above all, it will provide the investment basis for developing the new industries of the future. Danny is speaking up for the green industrial revolution, and there's something unbelievably absurd about Bifab in Fife not being allowed to sell the wind farms they want to make to be placed in Scotland, instead having to look out to the sea and watch them being imported from Indonesia to be constructed off the coast of Scotland. This is absurd beyond belief. What we want is jobs in Scotland to make the energy sources for the future in Scotland. And we will be making sure that happens. But we'll also be addressing the life chances of our children. Under universal credit, terrible poverty has come. Debt levels have risen, evictions have happened in the private rented sector, and desperate levels of depression amongst those who have disabilities and are told they've got to undertake a capability for work test, and when they fail that test, in the sense they're told to go to work even though they know they can't, lose all benefits, some sadly have committed an act of desperation in taking their own lives as a result of it. And two-child policy on benefit income, and we have a rape clause in which women who give birth to a child through rape have to go through the most excruciatingly inquisitive form as to what happened, how it happened, and what took place, if that child is to get any support or that mother to get any support. This is inhuman in modern Britain, so I have followed the careers of many Tory politicians over the years. I remember when Ian Duncan-Smith went to Easter House and told he was going to end poverty before the 2010 election. He got into office and promoted universal credit and the poverty that came with it. So I was pleased to go to his constituency in Chingford and Woodford Green, stand there in the town square in the middle, along with our local campaigning candidates, and say, we, the Labour government, will end universal credit and go back to a proper system of social security in Britain. And I was proud to do that. Proud to do that because of the implications it will have for so many people. We go into this election campaign very determined to win it. We've got a campaign going on all over the country. People vote for lots of different reasons. But I want people to understand that on the issues of Europe and relationship with Europe, we have worked very hard to keep our movement, our party and our country together. Whether people voted leave or voted remain, they must be heard and they must be listened to, and an understanding of why they voted in those directions. And so, the Labour government will negotiate within 3 months of taking office an arrangement with the European Union under which we could leave but maintain our trading relationships, a customs union, therefore protecting the Good Friday Peace Agreement and protection of the rights at work, consumer rights and environmental standards that we've got, and put that to a vote of the people of the UK to decide what their choice is between those. I say that because we refuse to allow Boris Johnson to disappear into having a no-deal exit from the European Union, knowing full well that his idea of a no-deal exit from the European Union is actually a sweetheart trade arrangement with Donald Trump and the USA. Because that is exactly what he wanted to do. Now, people might say to me, well, actually, you're scamming, it's not true. Well, if it's not true, why did Trump himself say that he wanted a trade deal with Britain in which the national health market would be available for American companies? The US ambassador backed him up and said the same, and then Johnson himself instructed his officials to open talks with US pharmaceutical companies on the future relationship with our National Health Service. If that doesn't give anybody any concern, I don't know what does. Why would they want to come into our NHS market? The principle of the NHS market was finished in 1948 when that Labour government brought in a National Health Service for the people of the whole of this country. And so, I make it very clear, under Labour, the National Health Service is not for sale to anybody. It's ours, and ours for the future. And so, our government will face many challenges. Many challenges because the people of this country face challenges. I talked a bit ago about the poverty people have. Poverty they have which can be alleviated by a proper social security system. But it's also the poverty they have because of the wage levels they're on. Wages have been frozen or fallen over the past decade, and that poverty is getting worse. The use of food banks, which were unheard of 20 years ago, are now rife all over the UK. The rise of rough sleeping and the rise of in-work poverty is a very, very serious issue indeed. Frankly, Britain needs a pay rise. Therefore, we will introduce a £10 an hour living wage for all workers, including young workers, from the time that we take office, because I think that is important. We'll do that and also recognise that rights at work are very, very important. Just talking before we came in here about the experience of miners from 1947 onwards when public ownership came to the mining industry, National Coal Board. What came with that was full recognition of the National Union of Mine Workers. What came with that was safety representatives and negotiations. What came with that was pit baths and cleaning. What came with that was greater safety. So by the time that Margaret Thatcher decided she wanted to close down our mining industry altogether, it was one of, if not the safest mining industries in the whole world. Why? Because it was in public ownership and because you had a strong trade union movement to defend that public ownership and the principles that went with it. And so we will repeal the Trade Union Act, and we will also introduce full employment rights at work from day one of your employment, not having to go through the lengthy probation period before you get there. So that people have got. So our election campaign is actually all about empowering people. That is what we want to do, and that is the whole theme of our campaign. Empowering people and using national investment tools in order to bring about improvements and change and solidarity within communities. But it's also what we do globally on the world stage. There's no getting away from it. The climate emergency is here. There's no getting away from it, but that climate emergency is serious. Look at the extreme weather patterns that happen in many countries around the world. Look at the drought that's going on now in Southern Africa, the floods that were there a few months ago in Mozambique. And look at the extreme weather patterns in this country as well. There's no getting away from it. We've got to do something about it. I went to Paris in 2015 for the Paris Climate Change Accord, and I was impressed with it and impressed with the people that were there. It doesn't go far enough, it has to go much further. And next year we'll be hosting in Britain the next Climate Emergency Conference. I want a Labour government to be hosting it. I want Danny to be there as one of our representatives at that conference. Not approaching this whole thing through fear, but approaching this whole thing through the use of technology to invest for the future. The jobs that are created by retrofitting homes to make them environmentally sustainable and reduce energy bills. The jobs that are there by the creation of wind farms, of solar, and of big projects like Swansea Bay Lagoon, Mersey Barrage, or a very big wind farm off the west coast of Scotland. All those jobs and technology can be created from it. That is the sort of thing that this incoming Labour government will do. I want our government's determination to redress the wrongs that exist within our society. A few days ago I was asked by a local journalist at one of our stops, what's your priority when you become Prime Minister? And you think there's so many things. They said, what's the one thing you'd like to do straight away? And I said, send out a message to the whole country and every local authority immediately. We will provide the resources to end rough sleeping homelessness once and for all across the country, because it is such an immoral case and it is something that has to be addressed, and I'm determined to do that. So we go into government with all these plans and all these ideas, but we recognise where we come from. We come from communities that fought for trade union rights in the 19th century, that fought for good quality housing, that fought for the right to be educated, the right to learn, that fought for women to get the right to vote, fought against race discrimination and racism within our society. That's what our movement was made of. It was made of the strength of unions growing with all the horrors of the 19th century. It was made by those women that demanded the right to vote. It was made by those people with disabilities that demanded a Disability Discrimination Act. It was made by those people in the Afro-Caribbean community who took part in the Bristol bus boycott of 1959 for the right to end race discrimination in employment law. It was brought about by people who wanted to create that fairer and more just society. And that is exactly what we'll do. And on the world stage, we'll be a voice for peace, for justice, democracy, and human rights around the world. We will not be selling arms to Saudi Arabia, to Bahrain, or anywhere else. And we will be supporting the Iran nuclear agreement, not because I approve of Iran's human rights policy any more than I approve of Saudi Arabia's, or indeed many other countries within that region, but because I want to live in a world of sustainability and peace, and that is what I want to do as a priority. And so we're going to this campaign with the enthusiasm of the young, the middle-aged and the old. Of knowing there will be health, there will be education, there will be the social care. Meeting to finalise the contents of our manifesto, which will be released shortly after that. The 2017 manifesto, for the many, not the few, was a groundbreaking document in the great traditions of the 1945 manifesto. The 2019 manifesto will definitely be even longer, because I've just read it. I can't tell you what's in it, but I've just read it. It will definitely be longer. But I tell you what, it's so inspiring to see it. Inspiring not just because of the great work done by the people that have actually put it together in our offices, but because of the contribution made by members of the party all over the country, by regional Labour Party conferences, by constituency parties, by trade unions, by voluntary sector, by different kinds of groups that have all got expertise. And as I travel around the country, I spend a lot of time listening to people, listening to the experts. Who's the expert on care? A care worker. Who's an expert on health? A nurse. Who's an expert on teaching? A parent, a pupil, and a teacher. You learn by listening to other people, and you learn by being inspired by the imagination and the activities that people undertake against all adversity. Nabil is an example of somebody who undertook actions against adversity that others may benefit in the future. That is what we're about. This election will lay the groundwork for the kind of country and kind of society we are going to be.